Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Ryan with Propelio. Today we have my favorite horror story of all time, Mr. Fred Robertson. He's in today talking about a story that I was first introduced to about 2 years ago when Fred called into the office that I was working at asking for a lawyer. And I was like, what do you need a lawyer for? And then he went on to tell me for about 30 minutes on the phone this crazy story. One thing we are going to try to do in this episode is not drop too many names because of non-disclosures and whatevers and that kind of thing. So Fred, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, no problem.
So real quick, tight summary, what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about quite a wild event that happened to me as an investor. You know, we're trying to buy beat up houses, go in, add value and flip those things and make a living, right? Well, I found a heck of a deal that turned out to be not such a good deal in the end. 3 weeks into working the project, while we were doing demo and had sunk some money into it, we discovered a dead body in the backyard of a property, and that changed everything in a real hurry.
So before we get into that aspect of it, the part of town was Bishop Arts, right?
Right.
So
Winnetka, actually.
Was that
Winnetka Heights, which right there with Bishop Arts.
Same
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
What was the ARV of this house that you were planning on going for?
I looked at the house. It was a duplex, 90-year-old duplex, and I was going to convert it into a single-family home. I was going to make it nice, put a grand staircase in, take out the duplex, obviously. I was going to add to what was like a massive attic. I could put 2 more rooms and a room up there and a bathroom, make a grand staircase going in. Turn that house into, potentially a $500,000, sale.
So you're looking at a $500,000 ARV. Like, how much money were you potentially going to put into it?
Well, what I was looking at is the purchase price was about $240.
$240.
And I was looking at putting $100 to $110 in the house. So it's going to be a home run deal, good deal.
So you're looking at least $100,000 net after realtor fees
awesome.
And all those other fees.
Awesome flip.
Well, that's a great day in real estate. 100
Sure
grand, 3 months, 4 months into the rehab. Sounds like it's been a beautiful project.
Right.
So this deal, we've had Connor Steinbrook in here before because he was one of the wholesalers on it, and we kind of got all the way up to that story. So if you haven't seen that episode, go look at it. Just to recap, he got the house. He assigned it to the only buyer he could find because the seller, who ended up being a murderer, only allowed him one showing. That person then bought it, threw it on MLS, and Fred bought it for $240.
Right.
So you're in the house, $240. You said 3 weeks in, right?
Yep.
How much money had you dropped into this house at that time?
Well, first thing we went in and demoed the whole thing because we were going to convert the house from a duplex to a single family residence. So all the walls, all the sheetrock, everything. The plumbing, the wiring was 1910 or whatever. It was an old house. Still had 3 types of wiring going back to knob and tube, right? So we took out all the flooring. We jacked up the house, leveled it all out, done the foundation work.
So you were doing significant.
Yeah, it was a major rehab.
Yeah, because one thing that just light bulbed in my head is on any rehab, when do you ever start in the backyard? You never. That's always like an afterthought, So all the demo and all that.
Well, just to go back, when I looked at the house, I had a realtor that had been looking for discounted properties for me, and she called me up on this one. And so I went out and took a look at it when we walked the house, and saw that it was going to need a lot of work. Went around the back and we actually saw this encased, what I call the crypt. And what I thought it was a compost pile.
Right.
Okay. I looked at it. It had a big pile of leaves on it. It was ugly, concrete on the bottom. I said, man, that's an ugly compost pile, but we'll take care of that at the end. No problem. And I never thought another thing about it. Right. Just thought it was something we'd clean out. But 3 weeks later, it started reeking. It started smelling.
So before they even started working on it, it was starting to smell.
Right, before they even touched it. And what had happened is the details of how the guy buried the body. It was a pretty crappy job. I mean, he bought pavers from Home Depot and set them up, mortared them together, and built a box above ground. It was kind of crazy, right? And put the body in there, bought bagged cement, I mean, the bags of the empty bags were still in the backyard, you know.
So
and
clearly he doesn't have Netflix to learn. I mean,
No,
I'm not saying
and
I know how to bury a
you know,
body.
my question was,
but-
why would he bury it above ground? For the amount of work he did, he could have, you know, at least dug a hole and hit it. But anyway, he built it above ground, put the body in there, poured the bag concrete over the top. So it was kind of a sloppy job, but it did seal it for a while.
Right.
Okay. But 3 weeks after I'm into the project, you know, apparently an animal dug a hole through the top of it,
And just started
about a
reeking.
softball size hole, and that's when all the odor started coming out. And I mean, it was powerful, you know.
So let's talk about that real quick. So there's starting to be odor. Are you on the job site every day? Do you have workers over there?
Yeah.
How do you first become aware that maybe something is suspicious back there?
Well, yeah, I go to my properties every day, pretty much, at least every other day. So I had some workers out there, you know, finishing up on the demo, and they were doing some foundation work, et cetera. But I got out there one day, and man, all of a sudden it just smelled really bad in the front yard. And of course, the bushes, there was all kinds of trash underneath it and everything. So I told the guys, I said, look, man, we need to clean this place up. It
Right.
smells, man. There's a dead animal around here. I immediately knew it was some sort of, you know, dead animal
Carcass
or something.
of some sort.
So they cleaned up all the bushes, cleaned all around the houses and everything, and it was still bad. And then I walked around to the side of the house where they had, you know, the guy had built this little crypt just on the back side of the fence, on the side of the house. Well, I walked over towards the side of that house, and the odor got really, really strong. And that's when I thought to myself, oh, you know what? Some animal must have crawled down into that box, you know.
Yeah, because you never think, oh, there's a dead body in my backyard.
No. And I said, you know, so I told my guys, there were two guys I had that were, you know, cleaning up the place, and one was named Charles, and he's a funny story, but I said, Charles, man, that's got to go today. You know? So you guys, I got some pickaxes and stuff, some shovels, but we got to get rid of that thing today, man, and get, you know, it smells bad.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So you're doing a lot of work on the inside. You've done a ton of demo. You're not quite into the rehabbing phase, but you're still that demo phase. And pretty much the only reason you started going to the backyard is because of the smell. And you're like, this has got to go now.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's almost a necessity. And you all went back there with the pickaxes.
Right.
And then what?
Well, so I got two guys that with pickaxes. We go around the back, and I'm kind of curious, you know, what the heck is in there.
Yeah, that's a big animal.
So I told the guys, like I said, you know, we got to get rid of that now. It's smelling, and hadn't planned to do it until the end of the job.
Right.
So Charles, one of the guys working for me, funny guy, he looks at me, he says, Brother Fred, man, I got a bad feeling about this.
You might want to call the police.
I said, well, what's up? He says, what if there's a dead body in there?
You're like, no.
And I just laughed, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought, you know, I said, Charles, ain't no dead body in there. You know, it's a squirrel or something's crawled in there, you know, and something died. And so, you know, he says, okay. So he takes the pickaxe, and they're picking away at it, you know. And this thing was built of rock, basically. I mean, it was pavers with concrete on top. So it took a little work to get in it. But he's chiseling away, and he finally breaks it, the top open, right? And well, I mean, it was smelling already really bad.
Okay.
But I mean, you could smell it down the street. It was that bad.
Oh, really?
It was powerful, right? Because the body had been in there for what, 4 months at this point?
Okay.
It had been sealed to this point. Now all of a sudden, phew, it was pretty bad. But anyway, he breaks through the top of this thing, and there's a plastic bag, right?
Oh, shit.
Now Charles really gets spooked, right? He's like, he looks at me again, Brother Fred, man, I got a really bad feeling about this, you know, and I'm still like, you know, no way, you know.
Right.
I'm laughing, and I say, Charles. He goes, man, there could be a dead body in there. And I said, Charles, you know, it's not a dead body. I mean, there's probably a possum or something. Who knows? Maybe somebody buried their dog in there,
pet, yeah.
you know, or something like that. And he's like, okay. I finally ended up telling Charles, I said, Charles, if you're not comfortable, you know, I'll get somebody else. And it's no problem, because he was freaked out, right?
Of course, yeah.
And I'm just kind of laughing, you know. I'm thinking he's just suspicious, right?
Yeah, and on that note, real quick, you know, one of the things in Propelio, we're always talking about the real estate, and sometimes we laugh only because there's really no other reaction. So obviously, no myself nor Fred are happy somebody got murdered. I just want to throw that out there. Neither one of us are that big of an asshole.
No.
You know, so I just want to state that, disclaimer that, because I mean, what else are you gonna do other than just like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No, it's just a wild story to tell
Of course,
now.
yeah.
But yeah, it's all obviously very unfortunate. But it is a wild story to tell. But so we're proceeding on.
So does Charles do it, or does he like, okay, I'll go ahead and do
no,
this?
No, he says, okay, you know, and he'd been working for me, so, you know, he didn't want to disappoint me, I guess. So he goes ahead, and both of them are hacking. And at this point, I'm really curious, what the heck is in there?
What kind of animal could give that
and so
much
I'm right
snow?
there watching them, you know, and they're breaking. They break that bag open, and all of a sudden, a bone falls out, okay, right at my feet. And I'm looking at this bone, and, you know, I'm just sitting there. It took me about 30 seconds because I'm staring at what turned out to be a rib bone.
Okay.
And I'm looking at this thing, trying my best in my mind every which way to make this thing fit a dog,
or
a
cat, pig, or a roast,
anything,
barbecue.
You know. And finally, after about 30 seconds, you know, I mean, we all remember in biology class seeing the skeletons. I mean, I looked at this, I said, man, this is a human being, you know. I said,
so the laughter went from laughter to...
I looked at Charles. I said, all right, Charles, let's call the cops. You know?
Okay.
And but at that moment, it was disaster in my mind, right?
Well, yeah, because one of the things that we didn't touch on that I did want to touch on is, so you buy this house at $240. You know, at hard money rates, that's a lot of you know, origination fee on that is high. The monthly interest is high on that. Yeah. But you didn't have hard money.
No, it was my money.
He spent his money.
Which was probably even worse.
Well, yeah,
you know?
Because now it's like the opportunity cost of that money not doing other things. And if a rib bone falls in front of your feet, well, obviously at that point you know no details other than the fact that, I mean, at worst in your mind right there is, how the hell am I supposed to sell a $500,000 house that had a dead body in it?
Well, my immediate thought was, you know, man, I have just lost tremendous value on this house. How am I going to sell a house? I mean, with this story, you know, a lot of times people, you know, a family is going to purchase it and they had kids. And, you know, somebody may not have cared that what happened there, but a lot of, you know, consumers would probably, with kids, wouldn't want to move into a house where somebody was murdered.
Well,
and all this.
I think it depends on the price point. And not to segue too much or tangent too far, is I looked at a murder-suicide house maybe a month ago, and whereas like, if we're talking about $100,000 or $200,000 price point, nobody gives a shit because they can get an almost discount. They're able to buy a house in DFW for a good price.
Yeah.
You start talking about a $500,000 to $600,000 to $800,000 house. People that are spending that much money on a house, they don't want suspicious, violent history with the house.
Well, you know, so I was immediately, you know, well, okay, this is going to cost me some money.
Yeah.
And you know, the next thing I thought of was, okay, I don't want to make a big story out of this.
Sorry.
Right. That lasted.
I'm just remembering our phone call. Yeah.
So
you call the police.
So yeah, the two women cops that came over from Dallas PD, you know, one of them tells me, she goes, it's going to be a story, you know, immediately. So she called her boss, and the next thing you know, a homicide detective comes over.
Well, just because I remember the story so vividly in my head when you told me in the first place. So, like, my favorite part of this whole story was the whole, is there any way we keep this under wraps?
Exactly.
And then next thing you know,
well, then the detective got there, and you know, he approached me and, you know, was asking me some questions and everything, and I asked him, I said, you know, is there any way we can keep this kind of low profile? You know, I don't want publicity on this thing.
Right,
you know?
right.
But at the end of the day, he looked at me and he said, no, this is, you know. And so within an hour, about an hour later, there were probably, well, they had a crime scene around the house and the street shut off.
Right.
Okay, my truck was in there. They wouldn't allow me to leave, I guess, for some short amount of time. I was even a suspect,
of course,
right?
Yeah.
But there were probably 100 neighbors. Because, you know, there were probably, I'd say 20 vehicles between, you know, the coroner, the detectives, the police department, cop cars, fire engines. They had
how many reporter vans?
They had two cadaver dogs there. I mean,
because they got to search. Make
yeah,
sure
they're
there's no
searching
more.
the house and everything, and under the house and everything, and it was quite a scene, right? With 100 neighbors out there. All the media showed up immediately.
And you're like,
they're all out there with their TV stands filming me, and I'm the only one that's not a police guy or a fire or somebody
on the
that's
scene.
inside the crime scene. So immediately they are like, okay, that guy's somebody to talk to,
How many
right?
helicopters?
Well, I looked up and all the network helicopters up there. Channel 4, Channel 2, Channel 8, Channel 11.
I just love the whole.
There's 3 helicopters hovering overhead, and I'm just shaking my head going, this is not good.
I know this is painful for you. I know it's painful, but all I can think about is there any way we can keep this under wraps? And then,
Yeah.
holy shit, there's 3 helicopters, da 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 da.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be kept under wraps. And
But all the reporters look at you
oh,
because
yeah.
you're the only
And they were hounding me. They were calling me on my cell phone. They quickly, they looked up in the public record. They saw I was the owner of my LLC. They got to me quick, and they're ringing my cell phone. They're standing across the street calling me on the cell phone, wanting me to come over and talk, right? And one
You want to be famous?
yeah.
You're like,
well,
no.
no, I don't want to talk. I told him, one reporter, I forget what network he was. He kept bugging me, and I just kept telling him, look, I don't really want to talk about it, right?
Right.
So he's calling me up, and he comes over again and starts asking a question again, and I said, so just to razz him, I said, man, looks like they've found about 10 bodies. His eyeballs got that big,
But I
right?
can't talk about it.
But no, it was kind of all in jest because I was, and he's like, I couldn't keep from laughing,
Right,
and when he said, man, you're razzing me, I said, yeah, well, you're razzing me,
Right.
so I just don't want to talk about it, right?
So
But,
real quick, if you're watching this, you're enjoying this, please give us a like. Please give us some love. Please give Fred some love. Clearly, he just stated that there were all these opportunities to be on Channel 8, Channel 5, Channel whatever, and guess what? He's on Propelio. What's up? So give us some likes, give us some shares, give Fred some love. This is one of those stories that's crazy enough that couldn't be true. And here in a little bit, we're going to get into the aftermath of all those true nuggets for real estate that's worthwhile, why you should be watching. Anyway, that's my little share tangent.
No problem.
So the
By the way,
aftermath.
we did end up on the cover of D Magazine.
Did you really?
Yeah, January issue of 2016.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't the big picture on the cover, but we were on the cover as a little side story.
Like,
I think
I'm an investor
I wrote
who
it down. I
bought
was
a
going to
house.
tell you. They called it "Mystery of the Oak Cliff Corpse."
There you go.
Was the story in
Google
D Magazine.
Mystery
So
of the Oak Cliff Corpse.
there was some publicity, at least locally. Well, it went nationwide. I had buddies in California calling me, "What, Fred? What?"
Were you able to buy any houses from that publicity?
No.
Shit.
But it was quite the news event. So.
So okay, there's all this news, all this publicity. What is your first step after going, crap? Now there's a dead body. Now there's a story. At this time, how much money have you sunk into the house? You already spent $240 on the purchase.
Yeah.
How much was the demo and all that?
Well, I'd probably put 25 to 30 in there because like we had to jack up the house. It was pier and beam,
Right.
and we took the beams were rotted, old house, right? And so I had a crew come in there and replace all the beams. Like I said, we demoed all the sheetrock. It was nothing but sticks, no flooring, anything. We were starting to replace the electrical and the plumbing in there. So I'd spent 25 to 30,000 beyond the price of the house.
So right now you're in at about 270.
Yeah.
Clearly you're not able to, even if you wanted to keep working on the house, you're not able to because now it's an active crime scene.
Right. Well, they shut it down, but actually by the end of that day, after they took in the cadaver dogs, they spent about 4 hours there. He turned the property back over to me.
In 4 hours?
Yeah. After they all left, and no, the media didn't leave, but they
wanted everybody to know there
the
was a
local
dead body
authorities
in that
left,
house.
and they said, okay, we're turning the house back over to you. So at that point, I could have done what I want, but obviously, I didn't know where this was going. I wasn't
Right.
going to sink any more money into it until I
Because you
figured
don't
out
know
where to
who
go.
that is. It the owner? Is it a serial killer? You don't know what it is. Because we
Right.
watch Netflix, we watch other shows. There's no telling who that person is. So at this time you just shut down until. Are you
Yeah.
gonna hurry up and wait? Are you calling people going, hey, what do I do?
Well, the first thing I thought, is that find out what happened and, call the title insurance company. I assumed pretty quickly that this is going to go towards a title insurance claim.
Right.
Especially, I found out very quickly. I mean, the cops, they kind of found out really quick.
That the person
they
back
brought
there-
a bunch of people in downtown and interviewed them, including the title company and the people that were there. Connor, and quickly found came to the conclusion that the deed was forged. And so I quickly learned of that, and obviously as soon as I learned of that,
You're like, cool, I get my money back.
yeah, exactly. I thought, okay, I'm gonna call my insurance and get my money back.
So you're calling the title company, which will remain nameless, and the escrow officer will remain nameless.
Yeah.
You call them up and you're like, hey, what?
Well, I told them what happened, and of course they, took the information and said they'd get back with me, right?
Right.
And they did, and what happens when you make a claim on a title policy is they actually assign you an attorney, okay, that they pay, right? So, I said, well, that's all fine and well, somebody to help me, but at the end of the day, it's an attorney hired and paid by the insurance company.
Right.
Now, they assured me that, this guy was not biased. It was a local attorney down in Dallas and everything. And, that's just the way the law is written. That's how it works, right? So he was kind of a liaison between me and the title insurance company. The case quickly went to the chief defense attorney for the underwriter. He was the guy that I was dealing with. And I got to him initially, but then after they assigned this attorney, he wanted me to, work through the attorney, and the attorney would then work directly with the underwriter.
And the way you explained it to me years ago was they couldn't help you because there was no claim, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like because nobody was like claiming the house, and they could only pay you if somebody claimed or something like that.
They were looking for an heir.
Right.
Right. And it took them a while. There was nobody. The parents were gone. He didn't have brothers and sisters. So they finally located a half brother in Houston. Right. And once I got his name, I looked him up and I called him. Actually, had a discussion with him.
We're like, will you please lay claim on this house so I can get my fucking money back?
Well, he said, that he knew about the house. Apparently his brother and mother had lived there for 20, 30 years. But he said he'd only seen the house one time, and it had been like 20, 30 years ago, right? And so apparently he was disconnected from the family or whatnot, or at least these people that lived there. But he was like, he didn't know what to do with it, but I said, you're the only guy that's the heir, and so then obviously the title company started working with him directly as well. But it took them a little while to even find this guy. At first they thought, there was nobody related to this guy.
So what's the timeline? So shit hits the fan, dead body in the backyard. Yeah. You're calling the title company, hey, let's do something. Then we'll get back to you. Then they do this.
It was like, typical claim for insurance. It's, a couple weeks go by. Yeah, I got a letter, confirming that I had a claim. Here's my claim number, that sort of thing. And then, within a week or two or whatever, they assigned this liaison attorney to me for me to work with. And then it was basically, me working, trying to find out details. Now, in the background, you had the detectives in Dallas for the homicide department, right? And of course, since they were working a homicide case, it was sealed lips. I couldn't get, and the detective, when he was at the house that day, he gave me his card. Said, let me know however I can help you. Well, as it turns out,
you can help me get my money back.
As it turns out, I made multiple calls to him trying to find out, what's the status, who is his body, what did they find out? And of course, their only objective was solving a murder case. Right. To be honest, I was pestering him on a weekly basis, the detective downtown. And I think I probably, made him mad at some point because he finally told me, he said, look, Fred, I'm really sorry you lost a lot of money here, or you potentially can, but you know what? That's not my job to figure out how to help you get your money back. My job is to find this guy, build a case, and convict somebody of murder. So, quit asking. So I was like, okay. So then I'm trying to go through this liaison attorney, because the title insurance, they were talking to the homicide department,
right?
And they probably had, more access than I did, right? Just because they were settling a claim or looking at a claim or whatnot,
or just,
right?
hey, I'm a lawyer, or I'm
whatever. That went on for weeks and weeks and months, and finally I started trying to say, okay, well, I gotta build a case here, because the title insurance company wasn't giving me any indication that this was just a clean, okay, let's pay you for, pay you off. And basically they had concerns and said, the number one concern that they had was that the body had not been identified, right? Now everybody kind of knew what happened. I mean, the detectives knew what happened. They'd interviewed Connor. They'd interviewed,
Right.
the title
It is almost
company.
obvious.
They'd interviewed the neighbors, talked to them about the history of the guy and all of this and who lived there. I got to believe they already knew who the murderer was, but they were building a case, so they weren't going to disclose all this information to me. So we're probably a month or two into this, and I'd kind of got shut down by the police department. Title companies just continuing to tell me they're working it, but this went on for months and months. And that's when I started losing sleep, thinking, well, what if they never identify the body?
Apparently, $250,000.
What had happened is the body was buried above ground in the summer from, I guess, April until August when I bought the house, in the heat of the summer.
Right.
So then the thing with DNA, and I started researching all that, DNA, there's different kinds of DNA, and I learned a lot, but turns out that, the heat and everything had decomposed the body such that it made it hard to do the DNA identification, apparently,
And then we always watch these Netflix CSI, Criminal Minds, and every Bones or whatever, where you could just identify anything from a hair, and in real life they're like, that takes work.
And the detective kept telling me, they were trying to identify the body still, but this went on for months. So after a couple of months, I started thinking, and in the same time, the title insurance, company was telling me that, listen, until we identify that body,
Nothing.
I mean, at one point, the liaison attorney conveyed to me, said, look, there's a possibility that, this guy, the owner's still alive, and he's in Mexico, and he gave permission to this guy to sell the house.
Anything not to pay you your money back.
Yeah, basically, and it was a business decision for them, right? Insurance, they weren't going to pay until they had to, basically. So they even, sent me some letters with a case, what do they call that, precedents in law, telling me about cases in the state of Texas where, there had been people who signed a deed and weren't the true owners and didn't have permission, but yet it was a legal conveyance of real estate property, right?
So
and I'm like, what?
So real quick, just not to tangent or go too back, because we've had conversations before. We had a conversation right before we went live, and I don't think we did it here just yet. Like when he gave the seller, the supposed seller, how did he convey that he was the owner of the house?
Well, what happened was, and Connor, who'd been on the show previously and I think told this story, he, I guess he saw the house on Craigslist, I believe is what happened. And apparently the guy murdered his roommate or his friend, planted him in the ground, then basically took all his paperwork and everything and put an ad on Craigslist and sold his house. Connor, as a wholesaler, saw that, responded to it, and those two went, got an agreement and went to the title company. And I think Connor's told this story. The guy showed up, and it was a little strange.
And he wanted his cash.
Yeah.
But didn't he say he faxed in his ID or something?
Well, he showed up at the title company, number one, asking to be paid in cash. And I'm not talking, a check cash. I'm talking dollar bills, right? And
Where's
the title
my
company
shoebox?
says, we don't do that. And apparently he got mad because he thought it was a cash deal.
Right.
The second thing is when it went to sign the deed and all the paperwork, closing paperwork, he didn't have identification. Now, I asked myself, me and you, we carry our ID everywhere we go, and certainly if we're going to, close on a property.
Collect money,
there were a couple red flags there, This guy's obviously doesn't understand real estate transactions, and number two, doesn't even have an ID at a closing, So I would have thought, at that point, title company and everybody involved would have gone, wait a minute, we got some red flags here. But so the guy says, she says, well, we can't do it. The notary says, we can't do it, and you'll have to come back with your ID. He says, okay, well, so anyway, he goes back and he has access to all of the paperwork, driver's license, everything of the true owner. So he takes the owner's driver's license and doctors it and puts his picture in there, makes a copy of it and faxes it into the title company. And that's how the deed was.
That sounds completely legit, legal, and I'll sign off on that right now.
There were some problems there. But he had signed all the documents the day he was there, and then the next day he faxes in identification, and the notary then signs off on it.
And this may be going fast forward too much, but shouldn't on the title policy aspect, shouldn't you've been cleared up because you bought a house from an MLS listing of somebody else who already bought? Shouldn't it have been that person that had to go through all the hoops? Because they're the one that bought a house that wasn't legal. So
Yeah.
maybe that's a conversation for a lawyer, but or a title company, because in my mind I'm like, you were a real person and you bought from a real person, and it was this real person that bought it from a fake person. Shouldn't these people, one be the
No,
thorn?
and even though, when you sign a warranty, I mean, you're warrantying it, but that's not how it worked. I went backwards through the trail, and basically it really came down to the fact that, they had already, purchased. Of course, Connor, he was just doing an assignment, right? So he never took possession. The other wholesaler who actually bought and paid for it, she was the transaction. The sale was happening when the crime was found.
Right.
The transaction was happening to me, so it all was put on me, and
so get back on the storyline of what we're talking about, and hopefully convey some knowledge about title policy, because you were saying is like, I learned most people don't actually read title policies, and in that
Right.
time you read it.
I never read one
Multiple times.
except the front page, and maybe Schedule B.
All I
Schedule
read
C.
is my check, how much money I make.
Yeah.
So to get it back on the rails of the conversation, so you're dealing with the title, you're still using their unbiased attorney liaison person.
Right.
At what point are you like, okay, I need a real lawyer?
Well, it's probably 2 to 3 months into it when, the pushback was until we have identified the body, there's, not a way that we can legally pay this out.
Mm-hmm.
And, and the feedback I was getting from Dallas police and everybody was that, they had not identified the body yet, and they didn't have any idea when they were going to be able to identify it. So at that point, I started thinking to myself, well, what if they never do identify it? Will I never get paid? So that's when I started losing a little sleep, right? Again, it was my money in the deal. And,
right, and it's not like, and when there's so many unknowns,
Yeah.
you're not going to finish the rehab.
Right.
Even though, right now, the house is still yours.
Everything was on hold, and I was looking at contingency plans. What would I do? I mean, bottom line, I guess I could have rented it, but even then I was going to have to put more money into it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I thought, well, okay, maybe somebody else would be willing to buy this thing at a discount. I looked at trying to wholesale it. Now, of course, to do that, I had to disclose everything going on. But I thought to myself, there might be somebody out there that's willing to take the risk.
Maybe there's another sucker.
If the price is low enough,
Right.
I could wholesale it off, but I would be obligated to disclose everything that's going on, so
Right.
it didn't come back on me, right? Well, it turns out I put it out there as a really hot deal, and I got a lot of interest. 2 guys actually gave me a contract to purchase the house, but they couldn't get a loan on it, right? Not even hard money.
Hard money's like, hell no.
They're like, no way. So I used that as further evidence and submitted that to the title insurance underwriter, saying, look, man, bottom line is I cannot sell this house. Here's proof, right? Mm-hmm. I advertised this thing, had a lot of interest. The minute they found out what's going on, no lender will lend on this property, so pay me. This is an unsellable house, right? And they held to their conviction that they were going to have the body identified, because and they were saying this guy might be in Mexico and he authorized this sale. They actually sent me a document with the precedents that showed a couple examples of where somebody closed and sold a house even though they weren't the owners. And for example, one was there was a guy and his son who had been buying houses and doing deals, and for years the son had been signing the deeds for the father, right? Even though it was the father's money. Well, I guess they got in a conflict on one house. The father didn't want the house sold, and the son sold it anyway, and it ended up in court. Anyway, the judge ruled that regardless of the fact that the person who sold the house, being the son, who wasn't the true owner, he basically said, look, you told the father, look, you've been letting your son sign these deeds for years.
Right.
So therefore, too bad. It's a good sale. Well, obviously that didn't have much to do with my case.
Right.
But it was precedence. And they gave me, 3 or 4 examples of cases where
They're like, did the son kill the dad?
Yeah.
No. So how is this relevant?
In my mind, it wasn't relevant at all. But for them, there was legal precedence that there had been legal conveyance of real property by people who weren't the owners and didn't have permission, right? And that they were legal sales. So they had to get to the bottom of that, right? Stonewalling to some extent, you know, probably, but again, they're running a business. They weren't going to pay until they had to. Now, I'm not going to knock them at the end of the day. I'm damn glad I bought title insurance because I did recover in the end, but it took me, you know, 7 months and a lot of grief.
So I know our original conversation stemmed from hiring a lawyer, and my go-to recommendation is always Julie Pettit with the Pettit Law Firm out here in Dallas.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's because she's one of the only lawyers I actually know, but also when you meet her, you're like overwhelmingly impressed.
Yeah.
At least I am. You know, you can use your own lawyers, but she's always the one I recommend. So she got involved with you, I later found out. How was she able to assist in getting all this cleared up?
Well, she helped me with information. Now, you know, we didn't file a lawsuit or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I couldn't file a lawsuit because, and a lot of investors need to know this, that when you sign, and I forget all the nomenclature, I think it's a T1 or a TR1, Texas Residential, you know, policy. But in the policy itself, and it's pretty standard, you actually give up your right to sue if you make a claim, and it goes to arbitration. Well, that arbitration is effectively run by the insurance company, right? They select the lawyer, and you know it's doesn't seem like a real fair system, but anyway, that's the law. So it is actually written in the title policy. If you read the 9 pages behind the declaration page, and you can understand it because it's all legalese, you'll see some of those, you know, exceptions in there that you know, nobody knows about. I've asked hundreds of investors since this happened, did they know, and nobody's known about that. And for that matter, probably only 1 out of 100 investors I've talked to have ever even read the entire policy.
Right.
I sure hadn't. You know, it's pretty boring and dry
So
stuff.
basically, to sum that up, is you're not allowed to sue the title company.
That's right. Well, you sign that right away. Now, you can avoid that, but there are other things you got to give up. If you know that, you can avoid that. But I would bet you out of 1,000 investors, not one have given, you know.
So how long did it take to go from the whole process to where here's a check?
Well, I bought the house in August of 2015. I got a check in, I think it was middle of March of 2016.
Okay, so it wasn't.
It was about 7 months.
But that's a long 7
Well,
months.
you know, like I said, for about 3 or 4 months there, I really was going to bed at night thinking I'll never see this money again.
Right.
And you know, $240,000 plus, you know, the $30,000 I put in. It's a lot of money to most people.
For anybody.
To me, it was a whole lot of money.
That's a ton of
right?
money. I think if anybody on any level of your real estate career at any time, you're like, you can just throw $250,000 away.
Yeah.
I mean, really?
Yeah. So
I don't think anybody's doing
you know,
that.
I mean, you know, it just gets back to the HGTV, and they make it look how easy it is to
I bought this
fix and
$100,000
flip,
house
and
and
you know, they make
woo,
it
I
easy
made
on
$1
the side.
million.
What isn't conveyed is there is risk, right?
Yeah.
There is risk in doing this business, like everything, you know.
Before I summarize, if you do have questions, if you do have comments, if you do have holy craps, drop them in the comments. One thing we do strive here at Propelio is to make this a conversation, less of a TV showy type thing, more of a conversation. So we do have that dialogue. So drop in the comments any kind of questions, any kind of commentary that you would like to add to this, or maybe I missed some aspects of it and Ryan's an idiot and like, okay, why didn't you ask him this, or Fred, go into this. But here's your open invitation to do that. So back to the win or the loss, or however you look at it. During this whole time, you're like, shit, I just lost $270,000. When they did finally pay out, what did they actually pay?
Well, with any title policy, you're only going to get paid the amount that you purchased the house for. That's what the insurance policy is for. Now, there are ways that you can pay extra, and in my understanding, and you can have that amount raised, right? But I think most of us as investors, when we get a title policy,
We're cheap as hell.
Yeah, we're just going to take the policy as cheap as we can get it,
Right.
and that's going to be for policy for the amount you paid. So immediately, you know, I'm $30,000 into the rehab, that's not covered, right? So, you know, I'm out. But so, you know, in the end, Julie Pettit, she did help me out to recover a little bit more money. The notary was bonded. You know, she had made a mistake in the way that the deed was notarized. So I was able to make claim on, against the notary, the surety company that bonded her, and recover another $10,000. That's capped at $10,000. Right. So, you know, in the end, I probably lost, you know, $15,000 to $20,000. But, you know, to me, after 7 months and thinking I'd lost $250,000, I was happy as a lark, you know, to only be out $15,000 or $20,000.
I mean, to only be out 15, 20, and have gone through this process of a dead body and gone through this process of title policy that I would say 99% of investors never have to go through, that's a huge win. Yeah. You know, and to be able to get that 240 back and additional 10,
and you know,
huge.
That was a lot of money to have tied up doing nothing.
Right.
That's what I was going to
say earlier, the opportunity cost.
I was so consumed with the case while it was happening that I put my real estate investing business on hold. I wasn't doing any other flips. I wasn't doing any other,
we're advertising,
you know,
nothing.
I wasn't doing anything. Finally, my wife, you know, one day she just says to me, you know, Fred, what happened? What's going to happen is going to happen. You know, you need to make a decision. Are you going to be consumed with this, or are you just going to go on and do your business?
Right.
And I said, you're right. You know, so I bought another house. And over in Allen, just a little, you know, bread and butter house.
First?
I checked the backyard real quick. Went through it, you know.
Like,
I hired a cadaver dog.
Like, but no dead bodies.
But
okay,
you know, that was the best thing because it took my mind off of, you know, this dilemma that I had.
And when did you buy that?
That was probably maybe January, February of 2016. Still,
so you only spent about 3 to 4 months of going, oh shit.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, and even then, you know, my issue hadn't been solved, but at least I had another house to work on, and you know, got involved in that. So.
Right. Well, it looks like we have comments or questions starting to roll in. So let's cue it over to Mr. Moore over here.
Is there anything about this property, like if you could do it over again outside of not buying it, would you do something different throughout this whole process?
Well, in the initial process, looking at the house and making the purchase, no. I mean, it was a home run deal. It was, you know, checking your comps, looking at, you know, what you're going to be able to sell it for versus what it's going to take to fix it. There was no question I would do that deal again in a heartbeat. It was probably one of the best real estate flips that I had the prospects of doing. So I certainly wouldn't have changed any of that. Going through the process, you know, I purchased title insurance. There are investors who sometimes don't do that.
Which blows my mind. You should 100% all the time, just buy the damn insurance.
Yeah.
The policy.
So I don't know that I would have done anything different or would do anything different. I think I did the right things. It was just circumstance,
right.
You know, crazy circumstance.
I will say on the title policy though, if you're like the title person you were working with, was that somebody, I know you're not going to name drop, but is that somebody that you would normally have used before, or is it just that's who the seller was using?
Actually, in this case, it was the seller was using them,
right.
And I accepted that. And maybe that would be one recommendation is to
always have you got it because your title company is part of your team. We talk about building your team all the time, and your contractor, your insurance people, but hands down, your title person is huge.
But even that, I'm not sure that would have made a difference. I think my understanding at the end of the day, all of these title companies are underwriting through like 2 major insurance companies, and they probably have their policies, and they're probably all the same. You know, I don't know that for sure, but probably.
Yeah,
you know,
but
so
I'm just thinking if like Daniel and I were in that situation, I'm pretty sure Shiloh would be like breaking somebody's door down to make sure they're taking care of us.
When I first discovered the body, for a fleeting moment, bury it.
Oh,
but I said quickly,
he didn't.
No way. You know, I couldn't do that, obviously.
And we're not. And Propelio disclaimer: we're not suggesting that you do that.
No. Of course, I wouldn't recommend that. But I mean, you know, instantly, I was like, this is a disaster. Well, you know, or cover it up, or you know, that I thought about that for a millisecond, you know, and then obviously, you know, we called the police and couldn't do that. But
I will say before we get over to Daniel, just
funny.
a stupid story. Many years ago, like 10, 15 years ago, when I was first getting into real estate, before I left real estate, my team, we had a house in Fort Worth, and we had some guys work on the foundation, and they're like, Ryan, I'm like, yeah, there's a bone down here. And we're like, oh shit. So we almost had that same situation, call the police out, and it was a cow bone.
Oh,
We're like,
okay.
thank God. And then like we overreacted for a damn, because we thought it was a femur, but looking back, it's like, of course, you're in Fort Worth. There's got to be cows buried under houses. But anyway, very not even on par with your story, but I just thought it was funny. Daniel.
I have a question here from Jason Riney. He wanted to know what happened to the property after title insurance was paid out. How did that process work from there?
Thanks, Jason.
That's a great question. The title company or the underwriter, actually, I signed the deed over to them. Now I had to sign, quite a bit of paperwork, and when they agreed to pay, they took the house. But in reality, the house was then, they still were under legal obligation to find the rightful heir to the property, which they did. They finally located a half-brother in Houston, and the house was really his. So, I suppose the title insurance company took some loss on it, because it wasn't like they got the deed and even the value, whatever value was left in the property.
Did you ever think about trying to purchase it from him at a discount?
For a very quick second, I actually received a phone call from the half brother in Dallas, and all of a sudden he had this kind of windfall, right? Of a house, and
right.
I mean, even though what it had gone through, there was some value to it, right? And he called me up and he wanted to sell it, and was wondering if I was interested in purchasing the house.
What was your thought?
For a moment, and I mean, realistically, at the price that I probably could have negotiated with him, I probably could have purchased it and turned it around and just wholesaled it, flipped it, and made a quick $20,000-$30,000 on it. But after thinking about it, I didn't want anything to do with the property.
Too much.
It had been too much stress, in the time that I owned it. And
what's the address of the house?
it's a 700 block of Winnetka.
All right. So if anybody is quick on Google, research that and see who owns it now, or if it's flipped, because that'd be interesting to know if it's been sold. I mean, obviously it's been a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
He's had to have sold it.
I think I
by
drove
now.
by there a year ago or so just to look at it, and it was sitting the same as when I left it.
Well, maybe we need to skip trace that thing and get that guy's number. And
if there's somebody there that's willing to take the risk, I mean, it might be a deal.
Well, I mean, this guy, if he got a house out of nowhere and you're like, look, here's $100,000.
Yeah.
It's already been demoed.
I know I'm not going to buy it, so any of y'all out there want to buy it, have at it.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty confident you've already done a good job on the demo side, so hey.
Yeah, it's already demoed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that would be an awesome story if you're like, I was able to pick it up for $20,000.
Yeah.
So I actually made $200,000 on this thing already.
And I just didn't want to complicate the legal proceedings and everything. There was an agreement reached between myself and the title insurance underwriter, and I signed a lot of things that I wasn't going to go back in there and open up a can of worms by trying to make a deal on it again, and open up a potential can of worms. So,
right. And as far as Kendra, as far as ghost house, maybe there might be a ghost there. I don't know. And it looks like, in Alfred Lamb, he points out, it looks like Kevin Tang owns it. So that doesn't sound. That's not the.
It sounds like an investor bought it. I haven't heard that name.
That sounds like an investor name. I mean.
Yeah.
So
now Connor, the wholesaler who originally made the purchase from the murderer, he told me a story that he went back in there, take pictures or whatnot, and he felt a presence of something. He was giving me some sort of ghost type of feeling,
Well, he was saying like foil was all over the walls.
Yeah.
So when you bought it,
weird.
when you got in the house, was there foil all over the walls?
Yeah, there was. And in a couple of the rooms, there was the walls were covered with foil.
Wonder, okay,
weird.
Pro tip, and I'm just making this up on the fly. If you ever purchase a house to be flipped and there's foil walls, maybe you should get a black light and blacklight that thing and before you purchase it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's kind of weird. Now, I will say that, I kept going back to the property even during the course of this, because at the end of the day, I still owned it, right? And so I'd go by and check on it, even though I wasn't doing any work on it. And I'd go inside and,
You'd light a match and just be like,
well, I would go inside
should I
and
drop this thing or not?
Literally, I was like, well, a murder happened here, all this, and the thought went through my mind is I shouldn't be coming over here without a gun, I was just starting to think weird things, but just going inside it, and it was a little bit spooky.
Yeah, and on that note, we have that conversation all the time about should or should not bring a CHL to on the houses, and half the people do, half the people don't.
Yeah.
The other half that say they don't, they probably do. They just don't want to say they do. I'm not going to say how many guns are in this room at this moment in time, but it doesn't matter. As far as, Connor says he had presence. Were you ever ghosted?
No, I didn't feel like that. Mine was more like, well, I knew there was a homicide committed there, and they hadn't caught this guy yet.
Right.
For all I knew,
I think honestly, it's like the fear of a ghost versus the knowledge that you might lose $250,000. I think the money outweighs.
Yeah, I lost more sleep
ghost.
over the cash, to be honest, than the thought of ghosts. Seeing Casper in the house. So.
Well, again, guys, if you're liking what you're seeing, please share this. Please like it. If you have questions, if you have comments, throw them out. As far as I think you already addressed what you would have done different, which is not much, because other than maybe owning a cadaver dog to go to houses with you, which might be overkill, but because it seems like, out of all the houses, most people when they hear dead body in the house, there was a suicide, there was a natural death, violent death. Maybe there's a violent death, but the police were called. But usually, I've never heard, and I would say most people have never heard, where there was a dead body found after the fact on the premises. So that's a unique story.
And it's a weird situation. And there's questions about, well, how can you sell a house where there was a dead person died? And there's all kinds of laws about that. And to be honest, my understanding of the law is that, I probably, maybe legally, wouldn't even have had to disclose this because the body was outside of the house. It wasn't, a murder inside the house, or a death from disease or anything inside the house, but so legally I may have been able to sign it without disclosure. I wasn't prepared to do that because I figured it just.
And that's an ongoing debate. If you're on any of the forums and Facebook, that's an ongoing debate. Should or should not have to disclose a violent death or a death at all, and some people say, well, there's precedence that you don't have to, and some people are like, well, I'm not an asshole, so I'm gonna do it. So it's just a matter of where you want to fit.
All I could think of, was if I did something like that, a family moving in there with little kids, and then the kids hear at school that a person was murdered in there, the kids are having nightmare, I get sued, because I'm causing distress to
the day and age
children.
of Google, just disclose
At the end of the day, whether what's law or not, you got to look at, okay, well, if the story's told in front of a judge, what's he going to say? Or a jury, what are they going to say?
Yeah, you're always the big bad investor.
It just wasn't worth
So
trying to do
as
that.
far as lessons learned from like the title side, you already alluded to most of it. Was there anything that we missed in this conversation?
No, I think, I think the best point is buying title insurance is a good idea. As much stress as I went through, at the end of the day, I got 90% of my money back.
Right.
If I hadn't bought a title policy, it would have been a disaster, right?
So
that's a lesson. The other thing is, if you've got the stomach for it, read that document, understand what it is. There are limitations to that insurance, right? As I said, you can opt out of that statement that says you can't sue. That is possible. You have to know that you have to opt out of that and take the consequences. There are some consequences on the policy, but read that document once. It's hard to understand, obviously.
So because it's been 2 years, do you mind if I pour some salt real quick just for our audience?
Well, we'll see.
Okay. So the murderer, he got paid, right?
Well, my understanding is that the money was wired to the bank, to the owner, the true owner's account, but he had the debit card.
Right.
And I guess he was there every day.
So even though he may or may not be in jail, somebody can Google it, he got paid, right?
Yeah.
Connor, the wholesaler, he got paid. And you don't hit me. The person that bought it from Connor, who listed it, she got paid.
Yeah.
And you, the end investor, you got screwed.
Yeah. I guess that's but nobody was malicious, right?
No, it's his business.
Connor got paid, and
I'm not saying anything.
But no, I don't,
Like in my mind, when Connor was in here, in my mind with him, I was like, you're lucky that you only made 15 because at a $15,000 assignment, you're not the one. First of all, no one's going to look at you going, holy shit, you just took a complete advantage of the situation.
Right.
Because, you know, 15,000 is not what he wanted to make. He wanted to make 80 grand on it, whatever. But, you know, if I'm in your shoes, I'm looking at him like, look, man, 15, you made out, we're all right.
Yeah.
But if I'm in your shoes and somebody else is making 80 and I'm still getting screwed, I'm going, ah.
Well, yeah, I could take that view.
I know.
At the end of the day,
And I'm not saying you
at the end of
should.
the day, they were doing their business and they were doing it legitimately. They did nothing wrong. They got paid. I just happened to be in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and
Yeah.
I was the guy that, you know, left holding the bag.
You're much more healthy than I am in the
So,
head.
you know, now it's been 2 years. Now,
2 years ago.
I will say that when I was in the middle of this, you know, I was complaining to everybody that, you know, this wasn't right,
hit
you know.
something.
But looking at, I mean, when I was in the middle of it, you know, I can't tell you how pissed off I was at the title
course.
insurance underwriter and that defense attorney. I mean, I was really, really upset. But now, 2 years removed, hey, look, it worked like it was supposed to. I got my money, most of it.
Right.
Okay. It could have been a disaster financially for me. So, you know, 2 years removed, I look back and I'm like, nobody did any wrong. Everybody was just
you
trying
know,
to
and then
do
when you were
it.
talking about going over there in the middle of it, just hanging out, like I'm not gonna say you would do this, and I'm not saying I would do this, and I'm not even saying Daniel would do this, although I'm sure Daniel would think about doing this. Is just, you know, the middle of the night going over there and just accidentally playing with some matches and just, you know, playing with some fire. Hypothetically, I'm just kidding, but you know, because sometimes you're just like, let this just burn the fucker down.
Yeah, I
Excuse
guess
my language.
I guess you know, throughout the ordeal, I held on to a glimmer of hope that it was all going to work out in the end. It really came down to were they going to identify this body, and
Right.
you know, I just prayed that they were eventually going to get to that, and they did eventually.
So basically, what you're saying is optimism is powerful.
Yeah, well, or keep you from going crazy at least.
Optimism will keep you from going crazy.
But
Quote by Mr. Fred Robertson.
no, but yeah, you know, I think about how much money some other people made in this thing, and you know, I know Connor didn't make a lot. I think the other person that made pretty well on it. But you know, again, I can't. She
but at
didn't
the
do
end of the
anything
day-
illegal or wrong.
But
right?
at the end of the day, you know, it goes back to that ongoing conversation we always have here with the sign or wholesalers in your purchase. If there was no BS with the dead body, the $240 purchase price still made sense. You don't
yeah.
care that everybody else made like
exactly.
$100 grand. You
know,
don't care.
I've bought deals from wholesalers, and they've told me what they made and made my mouth drop. You know, but you know what? I don't care because
Right.
I made a lot of
Right.
money on the house too.
So, yeah, so-
more power to them. You
yeah,
know, I've
flippers-
wholesaled some deals. You
Yeah.
know, I've been paid crazy amount for flipping a paper to, you know, another wholesaler. I
Right.
couldn't believe how much they paid me for it. But it's, you know, nobody's doing anything wrong here. It's just
Right.
opportunity. And,
Yeah, if the deal works for you, it should work. You should not feel malicious towards a wholesaler because they made 80 grand.
Yeah.
It just a little daggery when you lose your ass because of a situation
It's just
that you can't handle.
wrong
Or you're
place
not-
at the wrong time
Right.
and wrong house and wrong neighborhood. And,
Well-
know, it was an experience. But you know what? You chop that up to experience, and along with all the other experiences I have. And
So
you know,
let's
it's all
look to
good.
the future. So what are you doing now? What are you looking for now? I mean, obviously you're still flipping.
Yeah.
For any of our viewers watching, how could they do business with you, or how could they help you out?
Well, I'm still flipping houses. I got two going right now.
Mm-hmm.
One over in Plano and one up in Louisville. You know, I'm probably doing about 5 houses, you know, total flips, you know, remodels, and then doing a couple of wholesale deals on the side, houses that I don't want to do. But, you know, like every investor out there right now in this market, you know, finding property is a challenge at a good discount.
At a deal,
right?
yeah.
And, you know, you got to pay the price to get the good deals. You know, you either got to market heavily or pound the pavement, be willing to, you know, drive for dollars, whatever it takes to find those deals. So, but if anybody does have a house that they want to sell, you know, I'm a fix and flip investor.
Well,
so
how they get hold of
send it
you?
to- Well, you can email me. My email is the letter f.robertson@tx.rr.com.
Looks like somebody's already calling you.
Yeah. But, you know,
Somebody's got a deal for
I'm like everybody else in this market, always looking for, you know, a good discounted property to work on. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I wholesale some too, so.
Now, if any of our viewers want to take you to lunch or take you to dinner or buy you a beer,
I'm always open
you're
for that.
always open for that?
Yeah.
So, hey,
I like
if you,
steak.
if you feel like this is a good story and you want to hear more, or you want to hear it from him directly, or or if you just want to interact, or if you just feel shitty as hell and you want to buy this guy a steak or a beer, he just said.
Or if you just want to, talk real estate, because we all in the business, we all just love to talk about it. And
we always talk shop.
I'll tell you now, I go to some of these investor meetings and stuff, and you know how all investors, they always got their war stories, right? Oh man, this hoarder I had, it was stacked up to this, and I just listen to all their stories, and at the end, I just said, look, man, you guys don't have a story. If you want to hear a story, let me tell you this one.
And that's something also, because there's been rumors of this story. Everybody's heard the story, but nobody knows who there's not a face to the story.
Yeah.
And real quick, what was your email again?
It's the letter f.robertson@tx.rr.com. And if you want to just talk about it, again, we like to talk about these things. It's a story I've told 100 times. It's kind of crazy, but be happy to talk with anybody about it.
So we're wrapping up here. Is there any final thoughts, any final tips that you would give to investors out there?
I could have quit real estate. I had an engineering career before this, and I did other kinds of investing and other paths to go. But to me, real estate investing is a great opportunity. This one could have knocked people out of the game. So don't do that. Stay in the game. In the last 2 years, I've done really well in this business.
Good.
And I could have been knocked out of it. So, they always say, if you fall down, get back up. And, this one definitely knocked me down a little bit, but I got back up, and now it's something I can almost look back and laugh at,
Well, I think you have to, because if you don't, it'll mess you up.
Well, don't quit, because something didn't go right, is the bottom line. I mean, you're going to run into challenges. I mean, hopefully you don't run into one like this, but don't quit,
Right.
It'll work out.
Well, Fred, thank you so much for coming
in. The only last thing I would like to say is that, this gives a new meaning to finding an old beater, an old house with good bones.
Oh.
I had to throw that one in there.
How long did it take you to come up with that one?
Pretty quick. We came up with that
quick.
one.
You're like,
we came up with that one a while back.
You're like, the bone is at your feet. You're like, should I call 911? Well, let me come up with a shitty joke. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can look back and laugh at it now.
Yeah.
It's, again, it's sad somebody died and was murdered and all
course,
that, but it's a story to tell, and I all kinds of publications have called me, wanting interviews and all this crazy stuff. I understand that they went and talked to the murderer here in Dallas when he was in jail, and there's been some publishers that are offering this guy, to write a book over this and stuff. So I don't know where it'll go with that, but
so even man, I don't even want to point that out. That's crap.
Yeah. It'd probably make a pretty good movie,
Oh Lord! And who's gonna play you? Brad Pitt?
I don't know. If they want to pay, I'll
there you go. I'll do it. Anyway, hey, again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Fred, for coming in here.
Yeah,
I
no
know, hopefully I didn't pour too much salt, and hopefully it was more therapeutic versus, painful. This is stuff we're trying to do here at Propelio, so we're always trying to do the real estate. So if you like what you saw, please drop the likes. Please do some shares. We do this Monday through Friday. If you're in the San Antonio market, we are doing an event on February 26th at the Carver Community Culture Center. There's details on Propelio, so check it out. If you're interested in MLS comps and lead lists, go to propelio.com. Final thoughts?
One other thing, if you do want to learn more about this story,
yes, sir.
Just go Google Ronald Shumway. That's Shumway. That'll bring up a ton of stories from a lot of reporters and news agencies and everybody about the details.
So all the stuff that you have non-disclosures about, we'll just Google that and then bam.
You find out some more details for sure.
You get all the names.
Yeah.
So for all of you who are going, who's the title person? Who's the escrow person? Who's the insurance person?
Yeah.
Google that.
Google that name. That was the owner, right, that was murdered. But it brings up tons of stories. So.
Whew. Well, if I had a beer, I'll pour one out for Mr. Ronald. But
yeah,
that
poor
sucks.
guy.
Poor guy. Anyway, well, that's a sad note to end on, but it is what it is. Anyway, we'll see you next time. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Fred.
Sure.